Hello, welcome to another episode of Kairozart. My name is Javier Gonzalez. I'm an artist from Texas. Today I want to talk about the mind of an artist, the soul of an artist. I'm not what you traditionally would call a fine artist. I don't do fine art. I do more comic book art, fantasy art, illustration, graphic art, that sort of thing. But I wanted to share my insight, my understanding of the mind of an artist and what it is that makes an artist tick, and from the perspective of an artist. But before I begin, I want to share a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from. I grew up in Grand Prairie, Texas. When I was 7 years old, my father passed away, and I spent a lot of time secluded in my room drawing. I began drawing cartoon characters like Garfield and, you know, Disney characters and stuff like that. And then over time, I progressed to Ninja Turtles and X-Men and comic book characters. But I spent a lot of time in my room drawing, listening to music, kind of shutting the outside world out, and just spent a lot of time drawing. When we grew up, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and I didn't have any kind of formal training. I just basically sat and taught myself. And what motivated me to draw was just I realized that I was good at what I was doing, and that motivated me to keep going and to learn as much as I could on my own with the limited resources that I had, because growing up I didn't have internet. So the only thing I had were comic books and maybe a few art books or anything that I could get my hands on. And I just practiced and drew a lot. I spent a lot of time, a lot of hours just alone drawing. I spent a lot of time thinking about things. I spent a lot of time imagining things and, letting my imagination run wild. So, during times where I, I got depressed, I felt isolated a lot of times. It was like my only comfort was to use my imagination and sort of use it as a way of escape sometimes. But, as I got older, I continued to draw and draw. But over time, eventually being a teenager, you get into, uh, sometimes you get into drinking, doing drugs, and that sort of thing, hanging around people that do that. So it was a period of my life where I sort of abandoned doing artwork for a while and was more interested in partying, getting drunk and doing drugs, and, sort of just let a lot of stuff go. But I would always end up going back to the drawing board, so to speak. I enjoyed painting, like acrylic painting, oil painting every once in a while. Um, Eventually, later on, when I got into doing Photoshop, I was able to do color in Photoshop and do artwork in Photoshop, and I also have worked in InDesign, formatting books, a little bit of graphic art, Illustrator, doing vector artwork and raster artwork, or just regular, Photoshop artwork. I also got into, making videos and doing video editing. And originally, when I started off doing video editing, I used a program called Pinnacle on my computer, and that worked for a while. Then I moved on to this other program by Sony. I think it's called Sony Vegas, and that worked. And then found Adobe Premiere, which is a video editing program. And so that was just all these things I just did for myself. It was just for fun. But occasionally I would take commissioned work like portraits, or for my high school, I did a whole series of portraits of football players with the Indian in the background, because our school at South Grand Prairie, the mascot was a warrior, was the Indian. So one day my neighbor asked me to do a picture of his son, who was a football player at South Grand Prairie, and he wanted the Indian in the background. So I went ahead and did it. I think I did it for about $30, and it was a full size. It was a door size picture, and I drew it um, in pencil, and then I inked it, and then I painted it with acrylic, and to top it off, I added some smoke effects using airbrush. And I was not very good at airbrush at the time, but I had this cheap little airbrush gun, and I did whatever I could with whatever resources that I had available. And so a lot of times you can sort of fudge it a little bit using resources that you have available. If you don't have certain things, there's ways around it. So I did that. They liked it so much, and the other parents at the school saw it, and they liked it so much that they had their own, they had their sons, you know, they had me do their sons also, because they were all football players. So I ended up doing a whole bunch of these, and then eventually did some for the baseball players too. But other than that, it was just like people asking me to do portraits for them and stuff like that. Later on, in my 20s, I started working for a company called Big Time Design, doing caricatures at Six Flags over Texas, a theme park in Texas. And I did that for roughly about 9 years. And so I had experience doing caricatures from now on, after that. So that, I was able to go and do gigs, and I still do gigs every once in a while. But that was a good learning experience. But most of the stuff I learned on my own. And but I'm the type of person, I like to observe people sometimes. I have met a lot of characters in my life, and I like to observe people and see, to try to understand people from their perspective. And being in a community with artists, a bunch of different artists, different types of artists. You've got artists that worked for this company, Big Time Design, that were, cartoonists, they were fine artists, they were graphic artists, and a whole menagerie of characters. And they were the greatest group of people I could ever be around. It was very inspiring to be around other artists. I would recommend, if you are an artist, if you like to draw, if you like to paint, if you like to create or sculpt, do sculptures, or any kind of form of creativity, any kind of form of creative visual arts, I recommend that you really get into some kind of community, some kind of artistic art community. Be around other artists, be around other people that share your creativity. You could learn a lot. Of course, within the artist community, sometimes you're going to have certain people that, for lack of a better term, can be a little stuck up. You got some people that take themselves a little bit too seriously. But for the most part, my experience has been that the people that I have worked with, the people that I've, uh, you know, my colleagues and stuff like that, people that I've been friends with that were artists are not like that. You know, um, everybody I've met have been really good. But it's a good thing to get involved in some kind of an art community because iron sharpens iron. You know, you learn a lot from other people. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about other people. You can uh, compete with each other as far as art style, or you know, it's good to have somebody to sort of bounce ideas off of. It's good to have input from other artists, and when you're surrounded by a group of artists, it kind of pushes you to want to excel and be better at what you're doing. Plus, it's good to have a network of people because, a lot of the friends that I've known have gone on to continue their artwork, to continue their career in art, and have, found some success and have published their work, you know, um, have gotten commission work, or they start their own business, start their own art business, and eventually you get to know a lot of people. I have friends that are artists. I have friends that are filmmakers. I have friends that are writers. I've got musician friends, and it's always good to be surrounded by this, by a group of creative people. I want to speak for a moment about the mind of an artist. Um, I only can speak from experience, from my own experience, and from what I have gleaned off of other people, other artists around me. The sort of generalization of this mentality of being an artist. Um, it is always possible to take yourself too seriously. Sometimes it's better to just kind of go with the flow and really just be yourself. I would just say my recommendation to anybody is just to be yourself. Don't ever try to be something you're not. Don't ever try to be somebody you're not. Okay? You may be surrounded by people that are creative, and you might be surrounded by people that have a lot better skill than you. And some people, I think, that can be that can deter them from excelling, or from really reaching down into their soul, and bringing out of them the creativity, and their own style, their own voice. Every artist has a voice. Every artist is going to have something to say. I remember that movie Dead Poet Society with Robin Williams, and he says everyone contributes a verse. And I don't remember exactly the quote, but I still remember that. That's right. I mean, everybody has a voice. Everybody has something to say. And it's always good to have different interpretations of something. It's always good. You can take one. Somebody is going to look at something completely different than you, and that's okay. It's okay if their interpretation. The people that work hard and get good at what they do it so that they can get better at their craft. It's a skill set. It's a skill that you have to work at it in order to perfect it. But each person has going to have their own style. And so my advice would be to anybody who's an artist that to find your style and make it the best style you can. Make it the best, uh, do the best version of it that you can do. I wouldn't worry so much about trying to emulate anybody else's style. Don't try to, look at somebody and go, wow, like I want to do it just like they do. Find your voice, and work on it. Find your style and work on it. Everybody, like I said, everybody has a different style. And I draw, like, most of the time I'll draw realistically. I try to make it look realistic, but I know my limitations. You know, I can spend hours and hours and hours working on something and make it realistic. You know, and yeah, it's possible to do that, but I don't always want to do that. I don't always want to have to spend all this time to try to make it look realistic. I Sometimes I will do it more impressionistic. I like to see things vaguely in a way, almost like when I look at a canvas, when I look at a painting or a drawing or anything I'm working on, I look at it, up close. I look at it, all the details, but initially I look at it from a distance. I look at it uh, sort of like a bird's eye view. I want to see the entire thing, and sometimes when you have these ideas in your mind and you can visualize them in your head, but when it comes to putting it on paper, when it comes to putting it on canvas or whatever it is you're working on, sometimes it really is a little difficult to get that translation, to get that image onto the canvas the way you want it to look. So you have to work at it. But what I have to do is when I start off doing anything, it's very sketchy. It's very, I'm trying to mold it. I'm trying to put the pieces together. It's like a big puzzle, you know. So I kind of have to just throw it all out there, and then I have to work it. It's sort of like when you if you take a big block of clay, you don't automatically start working on all the details. You gotta shape it and mold it and then eventually the details will come. And sometimes you start something off with an idea in your mind, and when you complete the project, you realize that it comes out a lot different than you had expected, or it comes out different than you had originally planned. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to go with it. You have to kind of just go with the flow and see where it takes you. Because I started out projects or paintings or artwork where I had an idea in my mind of what I wanted, but as I started to work on it, other ideas came in, other things, came in, and it began to take a different form. And so I just went with it, and then it turns out, when it's all said and done, it comes out the way I believe that it was supposed to be. You know, I think that when we get inspired, when we get inspiration from anywhere, and it could be anything. It could be music that you listen to. It could be a movie that you watch. It could be a piece of artwork that you see. It could be something or anything that happens in life. We get inspired from all sorts of things. So I believe that when we get that inspiration and we begin to, express it visually, um, it is going to take a life. It's going to take on a life of its own. And all you have to do, you just have to sort of be the tool that brings it about, that you know creates it and manifests it. And it's almost like you take a back seat and let the idea, you know, grow and become its own. But going back for a minute, let me backtrack just a second and go back to the mind of an artist. Now, a lot of people are different. This is just my experience. This is my perspective. This is my methodology. This is what how I approach things, how I view things. I've met a lot of artists in my time, and you know, a pretty, a pretty good range of people. Not the greatest amount. I'm not going to say that I've had all of the experience in the world. But from what I've gathered, um, every person who is an artist, every person who is a creative person, um, they all have this personality about them. And sometimes, we kind of joke. You could joke about it and say, artists are, kind of weird characters, which is sort of true. We do stand out sometimes. We're weird. We're eccentric. We're, you know, kind of uh, we're just characters sometimes, and that's okay because when you try to be something, when you try to conform to society, when you try to, um, you know, uh, be something that people want you to be, then you limit yourself. Uh, Sometimes it's best to just go with the flow, be yourself, be quirky, you know. Don't think of it as a flaw. Don't think of it as when you look at, when you think about what people might say about you or, might make comments about you or think a certain way about you because oh, he's weird or, you know, he does things like this and that. It's like that is not to me that's not a you know, that's not a put down. That's not an insult because if I see an artist who is a little eccentric or a little bit, strange sometimes or whatever, to me, I'm not gonna say, well, I might say, yeah, that person's a little quirky, but that's all right because, you know, that person is, we don't understand what the person's going through. We don't know what they're thinking, and I'm sure there's a purpose behind it. So really, just the point is just to be yourself. And there are some, there is sort of a theme or pattern sometimes when it comes to artists. Is that I think that a lot of times an artist sometimes you can just your mind can just go out there so far. Sometimes you can just your imagination is just so extreme and you think of things all the time. You have ideas all the time, and sometimes it's hard to kind of deal with reality. We get so involved in escape. We escape reality, in our minds by thinking about all the creative things. We geek out on anime or movies or comic books or artwork and stuff. It's like we escape reality. And because of that, reality really can become less interesting, than this escapism, than this other world. And what can happen is sort of like it's almost like you're on a high. It's like you're taking some kind of a drug, and it's like I always say sometimes, art is a drug. When you're when I'm painting, when I'm creating something, like it's addictive sometimes. You can get into it and you're just like, man, it's like, I love this. This is awesome. This is like crazy. I'm gonna be able to create these things. And it's like, it can be, very addictive, very euphoric feeling. So when you come down from that, when you're away from that, and you're just dealing with everyday life, sometimes an artist will resort to escapism in other forms, drinking, drugs, alcohol, whatever, you know, other addictions in a way. And sometimes it happens that an artist can feel disconnected from the people around them. And because of that, you know, they feel sort of like an artist feels sometimes that, they can't express themselves as good as they can when they express themselves on the canvas. And because of that, you know, um, an artist is able to express themselves on the canvas, but at the same time be disconnected to the people around them. and feel as though they don't, other people don't understand them, and they don't understand them, or they think that they're weird, or they have this sort of disconnect from society, disconnect from the community around them, and that can resort to depression, that can resort to suicidal thoughts, that can resort to drug abuse, or acting in violent behavior, or doing things that are harmful to themselves and to other people. And take for example Vincent van Gogh. Okay, um, he was completely, uh, you know, he became disconnected, really, from the outside world, and ended up taking his own life. You know, from what I understand, he, wasn't successful as an artist. Maybe he felt like a failure. Maybe he felt like he was disconnected from, maybe he was didn't feel like he really measured up to the level of the artist in his day. Maybe he wasn't appreciated. You know, for all I know, maybe he was just a jerk. And maybe he just couldn't handle the pressures of whatever it was that was going on in his life, and he lashed out or whatever. Whatever the reason is, he ended up taking his own life. And a lot of times, sometimes artists will do that. They, you know, when they get into a dark place, sometimes our minds, we travel down this road, down this river, like in the heart of darkness, you're traveling down this river into the darkest realms, of our minds. Sometimes an artist, we can get lost in our own mind. And so, it's good to have a community of people around to sort of pull you out of the fire, to pull you out of the darkness. Because in reality, when it's all said and done, you are an artist and you're creating something, but you don't have to get lost in this world. You have other people around you. You need a support group, so to speak. You have, a community of people around you, and that help each other out. But for me as an artist, like I said, I'm not a fine artist. I'm not a, I think that way. I could do that sort of thing, and I will do that actually, because I've been thinking a lot about doing some more fine art. I've been thinking a lot about, progressing my ability and trying different things. But as an artist, when the way I approach things sometimes is I'm very analytical about things, almost to the point where it's like I'm my worst critic. I am my worst critic. I um, am very picky about certain things, and I am having to learn to kind of not be as much, kind of let some of that stuff go. You know that that sort of thing can, when you are a perfectionist, yes, you want to make it look perfect. You want to make it look as best you can, but you have to accept the fact that it's never going to be perfect. Okay? Somebody said a quote that art is never finished, it's just abandoned. Okay? We are never going to get to that perfection that we're striving for. We can strive for it and strive for it, but don't kill yourself trying to get it. Okay? It's not worth it. Sometimes you just have to accept it the way it is, be happy with it, and move on to the next thing, because you can get bogged down so much on one, project, one piece of art, and that it stops you from progressing. It stops you from going on to the next thing. And eventually, you have to just abandon it. You have to just go, okay, I've put in as much time as I am able to. I've put in, my heart and soul into this thing. It's as good as it's gonna be right now, but of course, I'm still like, I know I can make it even better, but I'm gonna have to kind of, put the ducky down, so to speak, and just move on and go to the next project and keep moving. Just keep going, you know. Um, you could spend eternity on something, you know, and you want to make it look as good as you can, yeah. But eventually, you got other work to do, you know, and that's something, you know, an artist has to deal with a lot of times is procrastination and low productivity, you know. Procrastination leads to low productivity. Also, uh, you know, being too much of a perfectionist can lead to low productivity because, you know, for one thing, if you're a procrastinator, which I struggle with that all the time. I struggle with procrastination, and it's so easy to just put it off, put it aside, and you know, I'll do it later, and eventually it's like time, you know, ticks on, time, you know, marches on, and eventually it's like you have to go back to it eventually. So my mentality is a lot of times I want to try and just get it done as fast as or get it done as soon as I can. Maybe not as fast as I can, you know. As long as I'm working on it, I'm happy. But you know, I have to work on it, and I have to do it um, even when I don't always feel like doing it. And I have to you just have to keep producing work, even though it may not be the best work you've done. But you got to get it out there. You can always go back later on if you want. If you see something you've done, you know, if you work on something you've done, you look at it. I mean, when you work on it, you finish it, and you're like, you look at it, and you're like, dang man, you know, it's like I know I could, you know, I don't like how I did that, or that doesn't look good, you know, man, I should have done it this way. You know, that's understandable. That happens, but you know, if you've got it to a point where, you know, if you have a deadline or you got to finish it up, you have a point where it's complete. It's just, you know, you want to go back and change it and stuff like that. You can always go back later, and if you need to go back and maybe even redo the whole thing and try it. Doesn't matter if there's two different versions of the same thing. I think about Frank Frazetta. Okay, Frank Frazetta when he Frank Frazetta, the fantasy artist, when he started working on artwork and stuff, when he would do something like he did, I think he did one of Conan, right? And he finished this painting, and it looks, you know, to me, it looks freaking awesome. It looks really cool. But he wasn't happy with it. He wasn't happy with it. It wasn't the way he wanted it to look. So he went and he redid the whole thing and did it exactly how he wanted to do. But there's two different versions of sort of the same image, you know. But it doesn't matter uh, because it's a progression, you know. I have sketches, so I have sketches of pictures, and then from that sketch, I've taken it and I've redrawn it and done ink, made it in an inked image, or I've done it in painting, you know, painting form, like or painted form, like acrylic or whatever. And you know, so there's different versions of the same thing. It doesn't matter, okay? Because in the long run, you know, you can publish what it is that's complete. You can publish what's complete, but at the same time, you still have these extras and stuff like that, and those are worth something, you know. They're going to be worth something. If you know, if an artist, you know, could you imagine? I would, you know, if somebody handed me a sketch from Frank Frazetta and said, "Here, man, you can have this. This is yours. This is a sketch that he worked on, a drawing of Conan or Death Dealer or any of his characters. You know, it's just a pencil sketch that he did. But yet, you know, I don't have the original, but I have the sketch. Are you kidding? I'm not gonna say, "Wow, well, it's just a sketch. I want the original." No, I'm keeping that and I'm gonna frame it and I'm gonna, you know, put it up on the wall because that thing has value to me. It is valuable. So anything you create is gonna have value to it. So um, it's okay to have different versions of it. But anyways, going back a little bit to the mind of an artist, and I have to keep going back to it because I ramble on and I'll keep going in different directions and stuff like that. and hope you can follow. Hope it's not too confusing. But um, the mind of an artist, like my mentality is that you know you've got a goal, you got a focal point you need to focus on. You have something, a certain goal that you have, and where you're starting off, you gotta just go towards that goal. Just keep walking towards the goal, and and no matter what, you gotta at least go. You gotta finish. You gotta finish what you start. Yeah. My big thing sometimes is I would start on things, I would start to get discouraged, and then I go and I move on to something else, and I don't ever go back and finish it. So I'm having to go back and finish what I started. And I wish I had known, I wish I had done, I wish I could go back in time and just say, you know what, everything I start, I'm going to finish it all the way to the end. And then I'm going to move on. But sometimes, that can slow you down. Sometimes you have to take a break from things. If you're working on something and you get to a point where you're struggling or something is, it's just not right. It's just not feeling, you're not feeling it. Sometimes you got to take a break from it, get away, do something else, but you go back to it and finish it. If it's something that's important to be finished. If it's just a sketch or whatever like that, some idea, and it's like, yeah, I may get back to it. I don't know. Same thing, like if you're a writer, and you're a writer, you're writing a story, you have a short story you're writing, and you look and you decide that, you know, well, this story's not working out the way I want it to, or, I'm having trouble with this, or I don't know which way to go, I don't know which direction I need to go, I'm kind of having writer's block. And then you hop off that story and go on to another story, you know. Always be thinking about that story that you abandoned, because you might find inspiration to want to go and complete it. But sometimes it does take stepping away from something and working on something else, you know, because you have to kind of go where the spirit moves you. You kind of have to go with the flow sometimes. There's times where I'll be working on something and it's like, this seems like I need to be working on this. And then something pulls me away and I end up working on something else, you know, and I might complete that, but then, I might go back to what I was originally working on and start working on a little bit more, and then something might pull me away again, and I work on something else, and then I complete that, but then I always have to go back to the original project that I'm working on, and I might add a little bit of this. So it's almost like whatever it is that you're working on originally, you know, something wants to come out of you. Something wants, to form. But, it's going to take a little more experience elsewhere in order to complete that. You have to kind of step away from it, do some research, get inspired, fill up your palette, with more experience, different ideas and stuff like that, and then you can come back and use it. And then you can come back to the original and finish it up. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up right now. I'm gonna continue this conversation because there is a lot more to say, and there's a lot more to cover. But to kind of sum up what I said so far is that if you're an artist, um, having the mind of an artist, you're going to you're going to find enjoyment in your art. You're going to sort of be disconnected from the outside world. You might be disconnected from other people, and people might think you're weird or whatever. But you have to kind of go with the flow. You have to express that creative, whatever creative language you have. You have to express whatever story that you're trying to tell, whatever message, whatever symbol, whatever whatever thought or idea that is trying to push its way out of you. It's like you're giving birth to an idea. You have to sort of disconnect yourself sometimes from people around you, but don't ever go so far as to disconnect from your own self, from your own mind, and always try to keep yourself grounded, keep yourself level, keep your feet on the ground, keep your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. And it's always good to have a community of people around you, supporting you, people that other creative people around you. That's always a good thing, because that kind of keeps you grounded, keeps you humble. Because if you walk around acting like you're a big shot and everything like that, you're gonna get humbled real fast when you see another person's artwork and you're like, wow, like I thought I was good. Look at this guy. This is ridiculous. How can I compete? And some people will take that as, well, if I can't compete, then I might as well just, give up what I'm doing. No, just take that as a challenge. That's a challenge. That's a competition. Artists compete with each other all the time. It's a friendly competition. It can get ugly, but it's friendly. It's a friendly competition, and we're all striving towards the same thing. We all want the same thing. We all have this common goal. So it's sort of we compete with each other, but at the same time, it's like it's a good thing. We learn from each other too. But an artist's mind is always filled with a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, and more ideas than we can ever put on canvas. More ideas than we can ever put on paper or put into the computer, So, sometimes a person who's creative may come across a little weird to people. They may seem like they're disconnected from others. But, as long as they are not, descending into madness, like, descending into a dark place, to where they can't escape from, one of the enemies of an artist is procrastination, but also an enemy of artists is drugs and alcohol. Those are not a good combination. And I know artists will say, well, I need to get high to be inspired. I need to get high to to create. It brings this out of me. Well, if that's what you need to be inspired and creative, if you have to be inebriated, if you have to be on some kind of a trip, some kind of an acid trip, or smoking weed or whatever like that to get inspired, um, you want to attribute your artwork to drugs and alcohol. I mean, why don't you just attribute your creativity to your own mind, your own thinking, your own sober thinking? But anyways, I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm just saying that, you don't want to use things as a crutch. Uh, Sometimes you just have to do the work. You can't always wait for inspiration. You have to find inspiration. You can't always wait for lightning to strike. You have to go out and you have to produce. You have to create, even when there is no lightning, even when there is no inspiration, because the inspiration will come once you start working on it. That's when you'll get inspired. That's when the ideas will come out. But if you're standing in front of a canvas, you're standing in front of a blank page, and you're not putting that pen to the paper, you're not putting that paintbrush to the canvas, okay? You're not lighting that spark. You're not initiating the inspiration. You're waiting. If you're sitting there and you're standing there in front of the canvas, staring at the canvas for an hour, waiting for lightning to strike, waiting for inspiration. You may be waiting for a long time. You got to just start on it, and then the lightning will come, and then the inspiration will come. Okay, you got to start working on it, and it doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter if you're like, wow, I don't even know, where do I begin? Where do I start? You just start anywhere. Just start, even if you start doodling, you just start doodling something, you could just erase it later. You might doodle something, you might draw like a cartoon or whatever, and you're like, but then, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got it. I know what I'm going to draw. I know what I'm going to do. And you just erase that cartoon or whatever like that, and you just start working on it, or you might already have something that you need to work on, and you start working on it here and there. You're like, this thing. Next thing you know, you start building up momentum. You start building up steam, like a train locomotive. It doesn't always take off. It doesn't take off right away. Sometimes it's gotta build up momentum. And one thing that will stop a train in its tracks is procrastination. Is the outside world trying to interfere on your creativity. So sometimes it is good to get this, to sort of disconnect yourself from everything around you and to focus on what you're doing, because in the end, all those problems are still going to be there. But if you let the problems, determine your direction, then that project that you're supposed to be working on, or that piece of artwork that you're supposed to be working on, is not going to get done. And those problems are still going to be there. They're never going to change. And we're always going to have everyday problems. They're always going to still be there. But, you let that stuff get in your way, you never get anything done. And those problems are still going to be there, And those will never get resolved. But you can finish what you are working on. You can have something complete, and then you can have that. You put that on the wall as an accomplishment. I've completed something. That's going to make you feel good when you see the completed work on the wall. So, I'm speaking to artists and non-artists out there. I think everybody is creative. Everybody can be creative, But creativity comes in all different forms. Whatever it is that you do in life, whatever job you do in life, you can put, your mind behind it. You can put your creativity behind it, and just do the best you can do. Do your best work. But it is good to see that accomplished work on the wall. Because that's sort of like that's your reward right there. That's like a reward to see your accomplished work on the wall. That will motivate you to keep going. That will motivate you to keep working at it. And you can always look at it. When it's complete, you look at it. You can examine it. You can analyze it all you want, and you can think about ways to improve upon that. You might think of ways to improve upon the same picture, or just something you did that was different. But the whole point of it is to complete what you're doing, and accept yourself for who you are. Accept yourself for your flaws. In fact, nobody can be perfect. The only person that was ever perfect on this earth is Jesus Christ. So we can't be perfect. You know what I'm saying? We're not going to be perfect. But we have to accept ourselves who we are. And we have to accept ourselves for who we are, and we have to, just kind of go with the flow. Go with your gut instinct. And and do the best you can do. Always try to improve. Always try to be better than yourself. Always try to be better than your former self. Look towards the community of people and be inspired by everything. be inspired by people, inspire other people, and sort of it's just like all these cogs in a wheel, I mean, all these cogs in a clock, just like all working together. So, anyways, that's it. That's it for that. Right now, this is probably the longest podcast I've had. It's almost an hour. But anyways, I'll continue this conversation because there's a lot to tell. But anyways, like I said, I'm speaking to artists and non-artists alike, and so I appreciate you tuning in to this podcast. And if you would check out my page for the Atlas Force Alliance, it's www.facebook.com/AtlasForce. That's facebook.com/AtlasForce. And also I have a page displaying my artwork and art related stuff, and that's facebook.com/Kairozart Studio. Kairozart Studio. All right, thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a great day. Be creative, find your inspiration. Don't worry so much. Just try not to worry so much, Just be happy. Be grateful what you have. Be grateful, to have another day. It's a beautiful day outside right now. And, I'm going to enjoy it. I have to do some painting today. I'm going to enjoy my day. And I really hope that anybody who listens to this podcast, just enjoy your day. Be happy with yourself. Be happy with the work you do. Be inspired. Inspire other people. Find your inspiration, and work at it. Just always work at it. And be happy with the progress you make. Don't beat yourself up, okay? Don't beat yourself up about things. It's never going to be perfect. Okay, just like I said, just accept who you are, and just be the best you can be, and do the best you can do. And treat others kind. Communicate with each other. Don't shut everybody out. Always be communicating with the other people. And just be happy. Just be happy with what you do. All right, this is Kairozart. My name is Javier Gonzalez, and I will talk to you guys later.